Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones! Did you know that there are several fishing games on the Nintendo Switch? Like just dedicated fishing games, not even counting titles with fishing minigames or mechanics in them. And considering how many of them just kinda look like this on the surface, it can be hard to tell them apart sometimes. But today, I'm looking at one that stands out to me personally. One that does something a little different from the rest. One that rips off Persona 5. And that game is Real Fishing Road Trip Adventure. Alright, dramatic statement and probably very clickbaity title aside, I'll admit I don't have any definitive proof that Sanai, the art director for this game, was peeking over Atlus's shoulder in pre-algebra class. I don't have any official sources that Bartholomew Natsume, the CEO of Natsume, stroked his beard and said, "Make it Persona 5-ier." You know what I do have though? Eyes. And hands, with which to make dramatic sweeping gestures toward the screen while screaming, "Look at it!" The character portraits and even distinct shading and color look very similar to the Persona 5 aesthetic, and it's especially obvious when you look at the general interface. The sharp but slanted edges, the white outlines on the boxes and nameplates, and even to an extent the tails leading from the text windows to the character portraits. Honestly, I'd argue even the font seems similar. Now, look, I'm not an expert on game design and how long it takes to release a title, but Persona 5 came out in 2016, and Real Fishing Road Trip Adventure came out in 2019. So they had plenty of time to see the success and visual flair of Persona 5 when putting together their fishing game. But why am I making this video? Am I here to call them out for just blatantly copying the art style? Am I gonna try and rile you all up to help me shame this game? No, honestly the opposite, because the way I see it, if you're gonna try and chase some sort of trend or success, aiming for more stylish designs and art is hardly the worst way to go about it. I just wanted to talk about this game because it's fascinating to me. I mean, it's a fishing game, with clearly Persona 5 inspired art, and I'm hoping at least some of you are gonna find that as worth looking at as I am. And if you like what I do, please consider commenting, subscribing, maybe even checking out the Patreon. It helps a lot. Thanks, moving on. But before I talk about this game, let's back up a little bit. What is real fishing? Well, stop me if this story starts to sound at all familiar to you. Fish Eyes was a Japanese fishing simulator developed by Victor Interactive and localized in America by Natsume as Real Fishing. Eventually, Victor Interactive was bought by Marvelous, who severed ties with Natsume in the early 2010s, electing to publish their own titles under their Xseed brand. However, Natsume still maintained the rights to the Real Fishing name and started producing their own Real Fishing games that aren't actually part of the Fish Eyes line of titles. That's right, it's nearly the exact same story as the 1984 adventure comedy Romancing the Stone. What? Sorry, I'm Harvest Moon. The only difference is that, as far as I know, Marvelous hasn't put out any recent Fish Eyes games to create the Story of Seasons parallel. Probably call it like Eyes of Water or something. Road Trip Adventure's story focuses on Sean, Neil, and Alice, apparently the only 3 members of their college's fishing club. Now, in the Japanese version, their names are Shun, Yuaki, and Rin, but Natsume gonna Natsume, so we'll just stick with the English names for now. Their fishing club needs to put together a vaguely defined fishing report, so they go to the museum for inspiration and stumble upon a painting that really moves them of a legendary fish called The Legend. While discussing the piece, they're interrupted by this old guy who says he knows the artist and gives the students the artist's address. And I've gotta say, I actually really like this as a setup. The titular road trip adventure will presumably take us across the country, where we'll stop at fun and unique fishing spots as we head to our final destination of— oh, we're here. Turns out we just took a train, and this is the last stop on the line because the tracks seem to end at this bricked-off tunnel. So we head off to meet the artist, and it's this peculiar fellow who looks strangely familiar. Obviously, I'm joking. The true artist actually turned out to be that guy we met in the museum, who calls himself Mr. Shopman. He says that if we want to meet The Legend, we need to help clean up the water in the area and encourage the local fish to come back. And how do we do that? Why, by fishing, of course! Mr. Shopman gives the gang different tasks involving catching a specific fish of a certain size. The game always tells you where to find the fish in question at one of the various spots, and you can always check what type of lure you need to catch that particular fish. These quests usually involve things like needing to catch a mahi-mahi larger than 1 meter at the inlet, or needing to catch a snakehead that's... Wait a minute, you guys are dealing with snakeheads? Look, if you've got these in your water, you probably have way bigger problems than a wee bit of garbage. Because as we all know...
A snakehead would make a lake dead, and all the little lives in liquid are jeopardized by wicked hellfish.
I just want to say, y'all slept on Central Park. That show is awesome. And that's basically how the game goes. Sean, like all great anglers, understands the importance of getting out on the water at the crack of 10 a.m., and you just catch as many fish as you can until it starts getting dark. Which, in this part of the world, I guess is, early.
Have you ever seen the sun set at 3 p.m.?
Mr. Shopman pays you for the photos of the fish you catch, and then you can pay way too much money for the same trash that we spent the day cleaning up, or ingredients for dinner. Back at the campsite, Alice cooks meals, and you can have Neil craft new rods, reels, or lures with the materials. Then you head to bed. Typically, if you finished one of Mr. Shopman's requests that day, you'll get a scene where the characters just hang out, and I have to say, I enjoyed these. They're rarely anything too fancy, but I liked seeing the gang around the campfire, telling stories about summers past, or talking about what they want to do with their lives after college. They did a pretty nice job of capturing the feeling of camping with your friends, and the Persona 5 style artwork helps it pop and feel more engaging, despite there not actually being that much going on in terms of animation or plot. One small aspect that I like is that each character has multiple outfits, and what they wear is randomized from day to day, so that helps mix things up a little bit. Which, while appreciated, it does strike me as a little odd considering where this game did cut corners. Like, sure, Sean has multiple 3D arm models depending on what shirt he's wearing that day, but they couldn't have put in some lighting or sound effects for when the characters are supposed to be watching fireworks together? There's no voice acting in the game, so I did just imagine all of the characters having the English voices of Ren, Ryuji, and An from Persona 5. Although our main character Sean is clearly more the Ryuji of the group. He even says the thing.
For real?
I think you mean for real fishing, because that's the name of the game. Except Mr. Shopman, by the way. For some reason I imagined him with the voice of the bookstore owner from King's Quest VI.
You are indeed a stranger. Anxious is the man who knows not the customs of the land beneath his feet.
I don't get it either, but it fits. Real Fishing Road Trip Adventure is definitely a distraction game. Like, you're probably going to enjoy it way more if you have a TV show or podcast on in the background. The fishing in the game is pretty zen, but also a tad repetitive. You cast out, reel in slowly, and hit the shoulder button when something bites. Reeling in is pretty simple so long as you don't let your line snap, and that's about it. Occasionally you'll get this thing called Angler's Focus, which is when the fish jumps out of the water, and if you succeed at a QuickTime event, you can quickly reel the fish in without it struggling. These don't happen that often though, and they served as a constant reminder that I will always mix up the X and Y buttons on a Switch controller. I actually do like how everyone's abilities kinda play off of each other. Sean goes fishing to earn money and reel in the occasional garbage. We use that garbage so that Neil can craft new fishing lures or rods for us, and the money lets us buy ingredients so that Alice can cook meals, which provides benefits to fishing the next day. By performing each character's specific task, that character will get experience points and level up, allowing you to spend points to unlock new abilities, like more fishing stamina for Sean, more crafting and upgrade options for Neil, and more meal variety for Alice. I do think Alice's meals are pretty underwhelming though, because every meal only has one of 3 possible outcomes. Increasing Sean's stamina the next day, granting bonus experience the next day, or increasing Sean's stamina and granting bonus experience the next day. Basically, once you unlock a meal with better numbers, there's never any incentive to cook anything except that. I'd have liked if the devs included more effects to choose from, like a meal that increases the amount of materials you find the next day, or one that increases the odds of catching bigger fish.
New record!
Or for the Angler's Focus event to happen more often. Just a little variety goes a long way. A minor complaint that I have is that you can only play as Sean. I think it would have been a bit more fun if you could mix up who's behind the rod and offer different stats and bonuses depending on who you use. Like, maybe Alice reels in a bit slower, but has better luck finding rarer fish. They're all members of the fishing club, so it seems a bit odd that Sean is the only one who actually seems to enjoy fishing. Now, okay, I can already feel some of you being like, this fishing game is nothing like Persona 5, I've been bamboozled. Yeah, well, I'm about to spoil the ending, and if you do feel so inclined that you want to play this game for yourself, you can skip to this time and bypass the spoilers. You wouldn't think a game like this would have much to spoil, but it goes places. After clearing most of his missions, Mr. Shopman will finally tell you where you can find the legend. All you have to do is go to that blocked-off tunnel near the train station at 3 a.m., where the gang discovers that not only is it not blocked off, but Mr. Shopman is here to join them, despite them not telling him they were coming that night. He warns them that they're headed through the tunnel into another world, and while he says that he's joking, nah, that is exactly what we do. This is not a real place, it is a beautiful, ethereal fishing spot. Using Shopman's fishing gear, Sean finally catches the legend, which turns out to be an oarfish, though the game never actually calls it one. Shopman warns the kids that they need to go now before the portal closes, so they run through the tunnel only to discover that it's once again bricked up, and that Mr. Shopman didn't come back with them. They check out his shop and realize he's gone. The gang eventually goes home and checks out the museum, only to discover that the painting they saw never existed, and the museum had no idea who Mr. Shopman was. Neil manages to do some research on local myths in the area and believes that Shopman may have been sent from another world to guide the kids to catch the legend, and by doing so, he was finally able to stay in that other world. The game doesn't outright say that he's a ghost or anything, but the group eventually finds his fishing album from the 1960s, so clearly there's some sort of time travel or afterlife shenanigans going on here. And I definitely didn't expect that from what has been a mostly down-to-earth title with kids talking about internships and whatnot. After you beat the game, it loops back to before you reel in the legend, only now you have access to Mr. Shopman's album and you can try and catch fish larger than his personal best. Honestly, I found I'd already beaten most of his records naturally by this point in the game. But if you beat all of his records and then catch the legend again, you will get an extended ending, so that's kinda cool. Despite me comparing this game to Persona 5, there are actually ways I wish they'd gone harder with it. The music is fine when you're at the campsite and stuff, but it's mostly just ambient sound effects when you're out fishing, which is the majority of the game. Angler's Focus feels like it could have had way more visual flair and have like Persona-style portrait cut-ins. Make it feel more like a super cool move that's part of the epic battle between man and fish, instead of just feeling like a QuickTime event. I know the original purpose of the Real Fishing series was to be, essentially, a somewhat realistic fishing simulator. But remember, by now, the series is only Real Fishing in name, and if they wanted to take it in this direction, I think they should have gone harder with it is all. I'm just saying, if you're gonna be a fishing game attempting to ape the style and flair of Persona 5, go all out on it and see what you can really pull off with it. I'd genuinely love a fishing game with aesthetic polish, some stylization, and a distinct blend of RPG mechanics and action. And why am I bringing that up? Because Natsume made a sequel. That's right, Real Fishing Days of Summer. This game only came out a few days ago in late October, because I guess releasing a game called Days of Summer in the summer made too much sense. However, as I'm writing and recording this, I've yet to play it, which is why you should all brace yourselves for my voice quality to suddenly change, because I did pick up Days of Summer and want to see if it managed to improve upon what Road Trip Adventure set in motion. Okay, so this video was supposed to go up on Tuesday the 5th, but supposedly there was some sort of delay getting the physical copies of the game out. Like, I went to pick up my pre-order from GameStop on launch day, but they told me they weren't getting it until late November. So I ordered it from Amazon, but even they didn't ship the game out for a good long while, and I didn't actually get the game until 2 weeks after it came out. But hey, at least the Amazon copy came with this free keychain. Anyway, that's why this video is out later than expected, so I'm sorry about that. Once again, I'm assuming this is because Natsume got a Natsume. But like I said, we're back with Sean, Neil, and Alice. It's 1 year after the road trip adventure, they still haven't recruited any new members to their fishing club, and they need another idea for a project, when Neil suddenly remembers, oh yeah, my uncle died, let's go use his cabin. Also, Neil grew a dumb ponytail over the past year. He thought I wasn't going to mention it, but I'm going to mention it. Neil goes off to prep the cabin, so Sean and Alice drive up together, and on the way there, they drive through some mysterious fog. Yeah, Days of Summer immediately leans harder into the something supernatural is clearly going on here side of things, which I can't say I dislike, although it being a lot less subtle just makes our main characters feel a lot more thick-headed, especially since they already had a clearly supernatural encounter last year and should be more astute about these types of things. Now, to be fair, I haven't beaten the game yet, so I can't fully confirm anything, but come on, this is clearly a ghost, right? Like, the only way he could be more blatant is if he was holding a sign up that says, "I'm dead." Instead of Mr. Shopman, Days of Summer has a lot more characters in it for the gang to interact with. Like Rick, this chubby loser with his stupid round glasses and his tacky goatee. Why anyone would want to listen to a guy like that is beyond me, but here he is. And then there's also Nicole with her surprisingly huge boobs. I wasn't going to mention those, but they really caught me off guard. Many characters in this game also offer side quests, so you usually have something to do beyond just catching the latest fish in the latest spot. Oh yeah, and the gang befriends two kids, Susie and Ken. Ken likes to fish, and Susie has a crush on Neil. And I'm only bringing them up at all so that I can do this. Neil's dead uncle's cabin also has an aquarium, so there's a new mechanic where you can keep some of the fish you catch and look at them. Riveting. Days of Summer does fix a lot of the game issues I had with Road Trip Adventure. I think the fishing itself is a lot more engaging and hands-on, with players actually needing to get information on the best spots to cast your lure instead of just tossing it out. I like getting to see the fish under the water, and there are also way more common and active above water sections. Honestly, I was really surprised how many things I'd mentioned wanting Road Trip Adventure to do are things that Days of Summer does. Alice's meals have a wider range of effects, including being able to collect more materials, and you actually can shift between which character you're playing as, and they have different strengths and weaknesses. In terms of gameplay, Days of Summer is a notable improvement in most ways, though I do still have some complaints. I don't like that your timer is now a depleting bar instead of an actual clock, and in Road Trip Adventure, you could cast out at 2:59 and still have a chance to catch one more fish. In this game, the day ends as soon as your bar is empty, unless you've actively got a fish on the line. Where Days of Summer really lets me down, though, is the art. It's really lacking compared to Road Trip Adventure. The character portraits, the interface, the text boxes, they all just feel a lot more boring, and Sean, Neil, and Alice feel way less charming because of it. If Road Trip Adventure's art is the Temu Persona 5, Days of Summer's is the Wish.com version of that. Oh yeah, and the music is rough. It's really hard to explain, but like, every track feels like they're playing 2 or 3 different songs at the same time. Between the better character art and UI style of Road Trip Adventure versus the enhanced gameplay and general improvements of Days of Summer, I feel like Natsume is so close to combining these ingredients together and making a third title that manages to do everything right. And by that, I mean, one that does what I specifically want them to do. I don't think either of these games were bad. I mean, I believe they're both budget titles. Like, Days of Summer was not a $60 game at launch, but they're also not anything too extraordinary. However, I think they could be. Double down on having the fishing matching the stylized world of Road Trip Adventure to create something more visually appealing with better music, while continuing to improve upon the enhanced gameplay, world, and characters that we saw in Days of Summer. If Natsume's goal was to make their own real fishing series, they need to turn it into something that really hooks us. Sorry.